need 2 hours to do it in detail. So yeah, maybe we'll continue on Monday. Do you have time? Can you make me a sign when it's 2, for instance? When it's 2? You can? Okay. So today's lecture will be about tightness argument for percolation. So the goal of today's lecture is to show how one can prove by tightness arguments the existence of scaling limits for some random geometric objects, like, for instance, we had seen percolation interfaces. So all the ideas and results that I will present today are contained in some paper by Eisenman and Borchardt, and I give you the precise reference. It's called Hölder regularity and dimension bounds for random curves. And the two authors are Eisenman and Borchardt. So, well, I would suggest you to look at this paper because it's really well written and really enjoyable to read, and the results themselves are well stated, so very well structured. And, well, what? No, this is more general stuff. I will make a comment on it later. So the typical setting is the following. We consider critical site percolation on the triangular lattice with mesh delta on some domain D. We assume this domain to be compact, closed and bounded, and we take, as usual, two marked points, A and B. And we color some of the arcs between A and B in black. And the other arc, we color it in white, like this. So this is black. And this is white. And we look at the interface between the black cluster connected to this arc and the white cluster connected to this arc. So this is a standard setting. So we have an interface like this. So we are with mesh size delta on the triangular lattice. And we get some random interface, gamma delta, for each positive delta. So this is more, I consider delta approximation of D, and I consider two points, A delta and B delta. So now for each delta, we get some random curve gamma delta, so we denote its slope by P delta. And the question is the following: is there any scaling limit when delta goes down to 0? Meaning that does this sequence of flow P delta does this sequence of flows P delta possess a limit as delta goes down to 0? Does it converge to some limiting law P? So here, by tightness arguments, we'll be able to prove that this sequence of flow possesses some subsequential limits, that there are some sequences delta k such that P of delta K converges to some limiting law P. But so the arguments will rely basically on compactness arguments. So these are existence arguments. But proving the uniqueness of such limits is far from being trivial. And identifying the limit also is not trivial at all. So in the case of critical percolation, Wendelin proves that the limiting law is that there is a limit, and that the limiting law is a law of a chordal SLA6 from A to B. And I remind you that to prove that, he used the fact that subsequential limits did exist. And then he proved that any subsequential limit had to give this chordal SLA6 from A to B. Okay? But it could happen that there are no subsequential limits, actually. I mean, if the curve got very, very intricate, in some sense, making lots of zigzags, then there could be no limiting curves in the limit. I mean, it could tend to some more general continuum object, I don't know, filling the domain, something like that. But here, we will prove that for critical percolation, using Rousseau-Seymour-Welch estimates mainly, this cannot happen. The curve, the random curve gamma delta have to be regular in some sense. Yeah. This is a convergence of the measures. Yeah, exactly. So I'm talking about the convergence of the laws of cis random variables. So cis random variables gamma delta converge in distribution to the law of some gamma. Yeah. So thanks for your question. So, yeah, it depends on the metric. So we'll have to make precise the metric space we take, exactly. So we will prove a regularity property for the curve gamma delta, and this regularity property will then allow us to deduce tightness using some version of Arcela-Ascoli's theorem. I will state it again later. That gives a compactness of sets of continuous curves on some compact. So I will give a precise statement later. So our reasoning will rely on the following property of critical percolation coming from Rousseau-Seymour-Welch estimate. So we have the following property. So this is hypothesis H, which is that there exists some lambda of k tending to infinity as k tends to infinity, and some constant ck independent, well, some constant ck such that the probability that gamma delta traverses k times the annulus AX of small r, big R, this probability is less than Ck times R over R to the lambda k. Where I use the notation AX of RR is a set of side Z of point Z such that we have these two inequalities. So this is the annulus centered on X like this with radii small r and big R. So actually this hypothesis is the only thing that we will need to derive our regularity property. So actually the original paper by Eisenman and Burchard took this hypothesis that they called hypothesis H1 if you look at the paper. And using this hypothesis, they could derive the regularity property and then the tightness property independently of the original setting. So here we will prove this hypothesis using also Seymour-Welch for critical percolation. But if you had any other model for which this property does hold, then you could still prove this regularity property and then tightness. So let's look at this property just a few minutes. This property means that gamma delta cannot cross more than k times any annulus of radii small r and big R. So what I mean is that it can do something like that, going back and forth k times. So actually, this hypothesis tells us that the curve cannot be too intricate in some sense. It cannot go back and forth like this around the site X. And so in some sense, yeah, it cannot be too intricate, as I said. So this is what will prove that we get a curve in the limit. So actually, what will be important here is not that lambda k tends to infinity, but just that it gets larger than the dimension for some k. So here, what will be important is that there is some k such that lambda k is larger than strictly larger than 2. And in general, if you consider curves in RD and look at this hypothesis with spherical shells, see what I mean? What will be important is that lambda k of k is larger than the dimension d for some k. So once we have this, so when we know that lambda k is large and this probability is very small, and if, for instance, if we look at our domain D, and we put, if we look, for instance, at the probability that there are k macroscopic arms like this, arriving to some neighborhood of size R, the probability of this event is less than, so now if we put, so let's assume that we know that the domain D is bounded. So here we can put annuli of radii small r and diameter of D all around the domain like this. that make sense? So, and what I'll get is that the probability of having such k disjoint arms is less than the number of such subchanneli. So this is diameter of D divided by R squared times this probability. So here, of course, Ck and lambda of k are independent of x, small r, and big R. So here I can put this probability, so I get Ck R over diameter of D to the lambda k. So this is some constant C prime of k times R to the lambda of k minus 2. And this tends to 0 as R tends to 0 if I assume that lambda of k is larger than 2. So if lambda of k is large enough, with probability tending to 1 with probability very, very high, I have no such k disjoint arm arriving very close to each other. So, and in the same spirit, we will prove also that so in some direction the curve cannot be too intricate, and in the other direction we will prove that it cannot fill the domain. It has to be some strict part of the domain in some sense. So well, first we should check this hypothesis H. Actually, this is a direct consequence of Rousseau-Simon-Welch estimate. Indeed, we know, so proof of H. Indeed, we know that the probability to observe one crossing here in some annulus of radii small r and big R. So here we are with mesh size delta centered on X. So if I have one such crossing of the interface, then I have also one black arm going from the inner boundary to the outer boundary. And by putting, so we want to, so I claim that this probability is less than small r over big R to the alpha 1. And this comes from Rousseau-Simon-Welch. Indeed, it's easy to, if I start from the inner boundary, if I consider concentric annuli around it, like this, so of size R, 2R, 4R, and so on, I can put of order log of large R over small r such annuli. In each of them, I have a white crossing with probability at least delta positive. So this probability here is less than 1 minus delta to the some constant time log of big R over small r, and this gives the desired upper bound. So now so this is something we had already seen several times. So now if I assume that gamma delta crosses k times the sum annulus, then it is, well, you can convince yourself that you have k over 2 disjoint black arms, at least. And so, using the BK inequality, the probability that gamma delta crosses that you have k such crossing like this is less than the probability to have one crossing to the k over 2. And this is still, this is less than C1 to the k over 2 times R over R alpha 1 times k over 2. So this gives the hypothesis H for any k. So our lambda k here will be this alpha 1 times k over 2. So this does tend to infinity as k tends to infinity. So in this case, this is quite simple. So let us now make a bit more precise the metric space we are considering, as Tom asked. So the space of curves will be the following. So, well, maybe I should keep this picture. So I will denote it by SD. And what I call a curve is a continuous function gamma from 0, 1 to D. And here I will assume that gamma of A, gamma of 0 is A, and gamma of 1 is B. And I decide to identify two curves if they are the same up to reparametrization, meaning that I identify two gamma 1 and gamma 2 if there exists phi some increasing bijection. So from 0, 1 to 0, 1. Such that gamma 2 circle phi is gamma 1. So here you can notice that each such gamma delta is an element of our space of curve SD. Well, at least if we, well, you can assume that this discrete domain d delta is such that d delta remains included in D, or otherwise you have to, well, enhance a little D, but well, this is not very relevant. So let's assume that d delta is included in D, so that gamma delta is an element of SD for any delta positive. So now the question is, now that I have my space of curves, what distance do I take? So the first natural distance when we consider subspaces, subsets of the plane is the Hausdorff distance. But here, for our purpose, this distance will not be strong enough. So, for instance, I remind you that for the Hausdorff distance, this curve here will be very close to this curve here. But here, we would like to keep track of the way we follow the curve. So instead of taking the Hausdorff distance, we'll take the quotient uniform distance, meaning the uniform distance between two such continuous curves quotiented by the reparametrization. So this gives this distance d. So we take the distance from gamma 1 to gamma 2 to be the infimum over all bijection phi. So increasing bijection from 0, 1 on to 0, 1 of the uniform distance between gamma 1 and gamma 2 circled phi. On 0, 1. So I look at all the possible ways to follow these two curves, gamma 1 and gamma 2 together. And I take the infimum over all these possible ways of the uniform distance between the curve in this case. So does that make sense, this definition? Yeah. Well, I think you have already seen it with. So this is easy to check that this is indeed a distance. And so we get some metric space SD D. And this is not very difficult to check that this metric space is complete and separable. And it's easy to convince oneself also that this is not compact. So now I would like to remind you two very important compactness results that we will use in the following. So the first of them is the Arcela-Ascoli's theorem. Not compact, yes. So Arcela-Ascoli's theorem states that if I take Fn, some sequence of function Fn from 0, 1 to my domain D. So I remind you that I assumed that D is compact. And so I'm talking about continuous function, of course, here. Then, if Fn is equi-continuous, there exists subsequential limits, meaning that I have for some mk and so for some sequence nk, fnk tends to some continuous function n as k tends to infinity uniformly at 0, 1. So this is a very standard theorem. And the second standard theorem is Proworth's theorem. It states that if I have some sequence of random variables in some metric space E that is complete and separable for the associated distance, so I denote it by D, say, then Xn is tight if and only if there exists. If and only if this family is relatively compact, so if the family of the laws of the Xn is relatively compact, so if and only if there exists some subsequential limits. So if and only if there is some subsequence xnk such that xnk converges in distribution to some random variable x. So these two theorems, you probably know them already. So now I can state our results. So our main theorem will be the following. This is some, we'll prove some Hölder regularity bound on our sequence of curves gamma delta. And more precisely, we have that for all positive delta, the curve gamma delta satisfies this Hölder upper bound, that gamma delta of T1 minus gamma delta of T2 is less than k of delta, some random variable k delta of omega times T1 minus T2 to the alpha for any T1, T2 in 0, 1 for some well-chosen parametrization of the curve gamma delta. And with the following two conditions. First, that alpha is universal. And also, we have that the random variable k delta of omega is stochastically bounded. As delta decreases to 0. So what I mean by stochastically bounded is that the supremum over all delta of the probability that k delta is larger than m tends to 0 as m tends to infinity. So of course, for any fixed small delta, it could happen that the curve is really intricate because any percolation configuration is possible, but using the Rousseau-Semmelweis estimate, we'll prove that the probability that this happens is very small in the following sense. So a corollary of this result will be the following tightness property, that the well, how to state it? The law of the curves gamma delta n well, if I consider this family, so for any sequence delta n decreasing to 0, the family of law P delta n is tight. It's relatively compact in the set of measures on this metric space of curves. So what I mean by that is that this sequence gamma delta n in our metric space SD with the distance d is tight. So it possesses, by Prohorov's theorem, it possesses some subsequential limit gamma in the space of curves SD. Does that make sense? These two results. So, well, actually, this corollary is a very direct consequence of this main theorem. Indeed, indeed, we have, well, let us take some epsilon positive. We can take m such that the probability that we know that this k delta is stochastically bounded, so we can take m such that the probability that it is larger than m is less than epsilon. And so what I get is that gamma delta of T1 minus gamma delta of T2 is less than m to the T1 times T1 minus T2 to the alpha for any T1, T2 in 0, 1. And I have this property with probability at least 1 minus epsilon. So this means that with probability at least 1 minus epsilon, this curve gamma delta will be in the following set K, which is the set of curves K, the set of curves gamma, such that gamma of T1 minus gamma of T2 is less than m T1 minus T2 to the alpha for any T1, T2. So I have that gamma delta is in this set of curves with probability at least 1 minus epsilon. And using now Arcela-Ascoli's theorem, because once I have this Hölder upper bound, I know that if I have this Hölder upper bound, then I know that this K is equicontinuous. And so this K is compact by Arcela-Ascoli. Well, here you have to slightly modify this version of Arcela-Ascoli because the distance is no more the uniform distance, but the quotient uniform distance. But everything actually can be quotiented. So there is really no problem. So if I consider this set of curves gamma that satisfies this Hölder upper bound, this is automatically equicontinuous, and by Arcela-Ascoli, this is compact. And so what did I get here? I got that T sequence gamma delta is tight. What? Yeah, it's close. I don't think there's any problem here. Well, it's relatively compact, but since it's close, it's compact. Yeah. So Hugo agrees. So, well, let us. So now that we have seen that this theorem here directly implies the corollary, we can now turn to the proof of the theorem itself, which will be in several steps. So first step, we have to show that, as I said several times, our curves gamma delta cannot be too intricate. So we have to give a precise meaning to this. So proof of theorem. So first step. So we will use the following definition. Take epsilon positive. We say that the curve gamma exhibits what we call a K epsilon crossing at scale R if it crosses, if it traverses some annulus AX of R1 plus epsilon R, for some x in the domain. So here this epsilon will give us some how could I say that, some degree of freedom, since if you look at what this means, so the annulus here, so it's centered on x, and it has radii r to the 1 plus epsilon and r. And as r goes to 0, the ratio between the two radii tends to infinity. So it gets harder and harder to observe crossings in this annuli. You see what I mean? Since here the modulus of the annuli will get larger and larger, so having crossings will. So what I would like to say is that there will be some scale under which we won't see any more k epsilon crossings. So this leads to the following definition. We introduce the following random variable that we denote by r of epsilon k delta, and this is by definition the infimum over all r less than 1, such that gamma delta exhibits k epsilon crossing. Well, let's say we take it equal to 1 if there are no such k epsilon crossings. So as I said, we would expect this. So this is the scale under which you don't observe any k epsilon crossing anymore, and we would expect it to be stochastically bounded away from, to be not too close to 0. So here we will prove that it's stochastically bounded away from 0. So we have the following lemma. Take k large enough so that alpha k, which is by definition epsilon lambda of k minus 2, so such that this quantity is positive. I have to put some 2 epsilon more. So if I take k large enough so that this inequality is satisfied, which is possible since lambda of k tends to infinity as k tends to infinity, then the random variable r of epsilon k delta is stochastically bounded away from 0. And we even have the following upper bound. The probability that r epsilon k is less than u for any positive u is less than some constant depending on epsilon and delta times u to the alpha k. So since alpha k is assumed to be positive, this does tend to 0 as u tends to 0. So let us prove this lemma. Well, the first remark is that if you take any such k epsilon crossing, actually you can restrict yourselves to some sublattice of mesh size. So here we take it of mesh size square root of 2 times well. So let's take some u like this and take Rn. It is 2 to the minus n, such that u is between so that R. Yeah, I have some k epsilon crossing at scale R. So less than u. So I take n such that R is between 2 to the minus n and 2 to the minus n plus 1. And now the first remark is that if I have some such k epsilon crossing at scale R, then I have a crossing of some annulus AX of 3 Rn to the 1 plus epsilon Rn over 2 to some smaller annulus, where X belongs to some sublattice. So, well, you have to be careful with constants, but I checked it and it's square root of 2 to the Rn to the 1 plus epsilon Z2. So, well, I let you make the picture, but it's easy to convince oneself that with these constants it does work. So what's important is that you can restrict the centers of the annuli to some sublattice, which is just Z2 with mesh size this quantity, and take the annulus to be a little smaller, and then you are done. So what does that mean? It means that if now can erase the corollary. If now I take N0 such that U is between 2 to the minus N0 and 2 to the minus N0 plus 1, then the probability that R epsilon k delta is less than U, meaning the probability that there is some k epsilon crossing below scale U. Well, we can just sum over all possibilities for x and n. So this gives you this big sum here. Sum over n larger than n0. So the number of such sites x that are at the same time on this sublattice and in the domain D. Since I assume that the domain is bounded, this is less than diameter of D divided by, so this is square root of 2 times R1 to the 1 plus epsilon squared. So this is, as I said, the number of of x on square root of 2 r1 rn to the 1 plus epsilon z2 intersection d times the probability to observe k crossings in this annulus here. And we know that by hypothesis, this probability is less than ck times 3 Rn to the 1 plus epsilon divided by Rn over 2 to the lambda k. And now what I get is just some constant c prime k times the sum over n larger than n0 of Rn to the epsilon lambda k. So here I get Rn to the epsilon times lambda k. Here I get Rn to the minus 2 epsilon, and all the remaining terms are constants. So I get Rn to the epsilon k minus 2 epsilon. So here this is just what I call the alpha k, and I assumed it to be positive. And so I get a converging series. So again, this is less than c prime, some constant c prime prime k times 2 to the minus n0 to the alpha k. And finally, this is less than some third constant times u to the minus alpha k. So does this make sense? So this gives you that the random variable here, r epsilon k, is stochastically bounded away from 0. And now we'll use it to prove the regularity property for the curves gamma delta. So what time do you have? Exactly 2. So maybe I'll have time to finish actually. So I'll have to be a bit sketchy at the end. So do you agree with this calculation? So we just discretize the problem and then summed over all possibilities. So second step now. So we need some more definitions. So to describe our random curves gamma delta. So first of all, we denote by m of gamma delta. This is by definition the minimal numbers of segments needed to partition the curve gamma, so segments of diameter less than so this is n of gamma eta. So n of gamma eta is the minimal number of segments that you need to subdivide the curves into segments of size less than eta. Another important quantity is the number n of gamma eta. and this is a quite standard quantity. This is the minimal numbers of balls of radius eta needed to cover gamma. So here when you know that you can cover the curve gamma with some number of balls, then it could happen that a ball, so I'm covering the curve with ball like this, but it could happen that a ball corresponds to many segments of the curve like this. But here, the fact that you can't have k epsilon crossings under some scale will prevent this kind of configuration actually. So these two quantities will be in some sense comparable, and this is what we will use to conclude the proof. So we will actually prove the following lemma. That for any eta positive fixed, this quantity m of gamma delta eta is less than some constant, some random variable k tilde delta times 1 over eta to the alpha prime for some random variable k tilde delta that remains stochastically bounded as delta goes to 0. So actually this quantity m is really, well, it's easy to convince oneself that it's related to the existence of Hölder parameterization actually, because what you want is just cut the curve in a sequence of small segments of size eta. So actually this is, well, having a control on this quantity m will automatically give a control on the Hölder parameterization and reciprocally. I mean, this is just another way of seeing this Hölder bond. And well, I leave you as an exercise that once you have this lemma, actually you have proved the main theorem. So now the proof will just focus on this lemma. So as I said, this implies the theorem. So let us turn now to the proof of this lemma. So a first remark is the following. First, if I have that R epsilon k delta, if this quantity is larger than eta, this means that there is no k epsilon crossing at scale eta. And so you can convince yourself that the number of, if I know how to cover the curve with some number of balls of size eta to the 1 plus epsilon, so I know how to cover the curve with ball of size of radius eta to the 1 plus epsilon. Then each ball, using the fact that there is no k epsilon crossing, each ball will correspond to at most k disjoint segments. So actually what you get is that the following inequality, that m of gamma delta eta is less than k times n of gamma delta eta to the 1 plus epsilon. So do you agree with this inequality? So actually this is the important the important case, because this implies directly that m of gamma delta eta is less than some other random variable k tilde, also stochastically bounded away from 0, times n of gamma delta eta to the 1 plus epsilon. No, not stochastically bounded away from 0, but stochastically bounded. So why do I have this inequality? Well, just because if eta is in the other range, if eta is larger than r of epsilon k delta, then m of gamma delta eta is less than m of gamma delta r epsilon k delta, and this is less. We apply the previous inequality, but now at scale r epsilon k. So this is less than k n of gamma delta r of epsilon k. And now, once I know how to cover gamma delta with balls of radius r epsilon k, I can deduce directly a covering with balls of size eta. And for each ball of radius r epsilon k, I need something like eta divided by r to the square such balls, because I'm in dimension 2. And in dimension d, I would just get some power d here. So this is less than k times eta divided by r epsilon k to the 2 times, oh, sorry, here I have a 1 plus epsilon, just like here. So here I get k times eta over r epsilon k to the 2 times 1 plus epsilon times n of gamma delta eta to the 1 plus epsilon. Well, on here I should have put some constant depending only on the dimension. But well, let's put it here, some constant. And now I'm done actually, because I know that r epsilon k is bounded away from 0. So this quantity here by the previous lemma, will just be bounded away, will just be stochastically bounded. This quantity here is stochastically bounded by the first lemma. So now I'm almost done. I just need to. So I would like to prove this inequality. So now I managed to say that I need to just to control this quantity. That turns out to be easier to study. So this will be the last step of our proof. And the idea is the following. You have your domain D, and you subdivide it into squares of diameter of, well, let's say diameter eta to the 1 plus epsilon. And if you denote by n, say n bar of n bar delta of eta, the number of such squares that the curve gamma delta intersects. So if you denote by n bar delta this random number, then first you clearly have that n of gamma delta eta to the 1 plus epsilon is less than n bar delta of eta. And so you are turned to prove this inequality now for this quantity n bar delta of eta. Does that make sense? And this can be done using the upper bound for one arm, because you can notice that. Just make a picture. I have my domain D. I have my interface gamma delta from A to B. And if gamma delta intersect some square like this, then I have at least one arm going to distance. So I have at least one macroscopic arm going to distance at least, say, norm of A minus B divided by, say, 3. So I have something like this. So my square of size eta to the 1 plus epsilon, and a ball of radius this. And so the probability to have this is less. So this is just a constant. So this is less than some constant times eta to the 1 plus epsilon to the minus lambda 1. No, to the lambda 1. So the probability that the interface gamma delta intersects T small square of size eta to the 1 plus epsilon is less than this power law upper bound. So this allows then to compute the expectation of this quantity. So this gives that the expectation of n bar delta is less than the number of such small squares, so it is less than some constant times eta to the minus 2, 1 plus epsilon. And then I get eta to the 1 plus epsilon, the lambda 1. So what I get here lambda 1 minus 2 times 1 plus epsilon. So this is the desired upper bound in the previous lemma. And well, once I have control on the expectation, I just have to use Markov's inequality to get the desired upper bound in probability. So does that make sense, this calculation? So, well, I think this completes the proof. So, what time do you have? 20? 2:20. So yes, let's make some comments on these results during 5 minutes. So as I said before, actually the paper only uses the hypothesis I mentioned. So it applies to any model where random curves arise. Once the hypothesis is verified, then I have this tightness result. So this is true in any dimension, actually. And actually, the original paper was written in a slightly more general setting. They didn't consider not just curves, but random sets of curves. So what I mean by that is that I have my domain D here. Let's assume that I don't put any boundary condition and just look at just perform a percolation of mesh size delta in this domain and look at the interfaces. So I get some what is called a random soup of loops like this, nested loop. And actually, using exactly the same types of exactly the same reasoning, you can prove that scaling limits do exist for this random set of loops. So, well, the metric you put on this random set is just Hausdorff distance associated to the previous distance D. So I have my distance D on curves, and then I consider the Hausdorff distance. Well, yeah, let you think about it, but I consider the Hausdorff distance for this distance D. And well, actually, the reasoning is the same. But there is some extra difficulty. You have to control, well, to treat apart the. On one side, you have the big loops, on the other side, you have the small loops. So here, for instance, when I computed the expectation, I used that the interface was macroscopic because I imposed it to go from A to B. Here, we have to treat apart the large loops, which are macroscopic above some scale, and just forget the small loops because they won't be important for the Hausdorff distance. So, well, well, also let us just mention that for instance, we know that Sommer-Welsh does hold on Z2, so you can still show that scaling limits do exist for percolation on Z2. But as I said, the difficult part is to identify the limit, and even showing that it is unique is not trivial. I mean, to prove that the limit is unique for the triangular lattice, actually, I don't think you can avoid to prove that it converges to SLE6, actually. So it makes a strong use of conformal invariance in the scaling limit. Okay, so I think I'm finished. So thanks.